Hello guys, this is Jones10395 with another video on my homemade crossbow. This is kind of a year later follow-up just to share with you a little bit more information about this that I may not have covered in the other videos, part 1, 2, and 3, which shows the making and the final product and shooting of this. I will link that in the description if you're interested, but back to this. I'm going to share some knowledge with what went into making this and some things I learned that made the operation smoother or better or easier to even make the crossbow itself. So if you're serious and you are making one of your own, you won't have to wait a long time as long as I did to figure these things out with trial and error. So I'll share that info with you in this video, but on the far out portion, not the close up portion, I'm just going over some changes I made, large changes. In this case, if you can see, I hope you can see it, it's got a glossy finish. I finally clear coated this. I know the wood grain stands out, the darker wood grain stands out, and makes it look really, really cool in any type of light. If you can see that. I don't know which angle you'll get the best shot, that's why I'm tilting it like I am. So that's really the largest change. But the shape and all hasn't changed. The dimensions are exactly the same as they were a year ago. On the front here, I took off those big circular blocks. If you have paid attention to the part 1, 2, and 3, you'll know what I'm talking about. There are these two big ugly circle blocks here that made this really thick, and the job that those were to do is to catch the drawstring, I believe it's called, but it's paracord in this case. It was the job was to catch the paracord and stop it from going over the track and getting stuck down here possibly. But in the process of getting ready to paint this, I took those off to paint them separately, like I did every part that I could remove. And I took those off and I shot it without those on there just to see if they would work without it. And it turns out it does. I know you're not supposed to dry fire bows, but I made it and I don't really care. I mean, I do care, but it doesn't really do anything bad to it, I don't think. So you can see that I don't need those to catch it because it doesn't go over the track and doesn't get stuck up under here. And that's probably because I have strung it really nice and tight, so it only stops right here. So that's really the large changes that I've done to this. If you can see right here, you can see those screw holes. I got a feel for it. Right there is a screw hole in the front of my pointer finger where those blocks were fastened with. Good thing I didn't glue them down there. And then, hole right there. So, that's how I had them on there with screws. But now we'll get into the closer up portion of this video. So here on the close up portion, I just want to say I have lost my tripod. Or at least misplaced it. I know where it is. It's just not at my house. So we're going to be doing this portion on the resting on a ironing board, so it may be shaky if you can see it shaking a little bit, but for the most part it will be steady. One thing I've learned before we get to the trigger mechanism, which is where the biggest changes have taken place, is right here, this screw, to keep the prods in place from stopping them from moving and turning and twisting, and that will in turn screw up your string, and your string will shoot off of the pulleys right here. I believe this is what they're called. I don't know, really looked at this in a while. I believe they're called pulleys. So they don't slide off the track or anything. What I did was I ran a screw through the prods. So first I pre-drilled it, and then I ran a 3-inch screw, 3.5 inch maybe, all the way up through here. So you cannot turn these, they will not torque or move side to side and get out of balance, and they will stay the same place every time. Just with this little screw. And obviously you can take this screw out and you can take the prods out, replace them if they're worn down over time, and restring it, and it makes it a whole lot easier. So we are going to talk about the trigger mechanism now and all the changes I've made to this. One, before I have to take this apart all the way, which I will in a minute. I have to take these two bolts out. I'm going to talk to you about this claw. That's the part I'm going to call it for the trigger mechanism. There's only two parts, the trigger and the claw in this case. I don't know if that's a correct term, but that's what I'm going to refer to it as. I had to sand this out with a Dremel, so I guess you can say Dremel it out. And if you can see how it's kind of It's hard to do in this angle, but at the tip it's pointed back instead of a gradual kind of point forward. That's because it holds on to the string. The string can't slip up over that claw. It's pointing backwards. One time I sanded this too much, and I sanded it gradually like that, to where this claw was exactly opposite, and the string would never stay down in here. And even if I had this cocked and the trigger mechanism itself was locked up, this string would slide out because this claw wasn't here, or the slip wasn't here to stop it. And this hangs on to it really nicely. So you need to make sure you have a nice little lip or claw or something that won't let the string go forward. Okay, so here we are at the trigger itself. We have just removed that claw part, or as I am referring to it as a claw. Before I start this, I just want to say this bolt right here, I'm using it as a pointer. That screw right there, kind of circling right now, that has nothing to do with this. I just have it in there because if I take it out, it'll be a big hole, and I don't want water to get in there and the wood to disintegrate from the inside out. So that screw has nothing to do with the mechanism, so don't worry about that. But right here, my pointer finger is kind of on top of it right now. This is the trigger. You can see when I pull the trigger back, I'm going to do it from the top. It goes down, and you can see this spring moves. This spring I actually took from the tappet plate of one of my old gearboxes of my airsoft guns that I don't use anymore. And I put it in here because my rubber bands I would use were dry rot. And then I went to a bike inner tube. I cut a bike inner tube because I thought, well, bike inner tubes constantly have air in them, and they never dry out. If they would, we'd know because our bike inner tubes would pop a lot. So I put a bike inner tube in there thinking that rubber would be elastic enough to bring this up when I needed it to, and I was thinking wrong. It was elastic and it did bring the trigger up, but it didn't do it fast enough and hard enough, and I would have a lot of malfunctions where I'd pull the string back, it would make the clicking noise like it's been cocked. I'd let the string go and the string would shoot forward because the bike inner tube that I cut up was not enough to hold on to this. So I put a spring in there for my airsoft gun. And that works out very, very well. How it's fastened is with a nail that I cut the head off of, so I turned it into a pin essentially, and it's kind of hooked onto that pin. And now I'm going to take out the trigger itself and show you. Just going to be able to pull this right out. There we go. So here's that spring. This is how it's fastened to the trigger mechanism, which is I believe it's oak wood or ash wood. It's a really tough wood, which is what you have to use for your trigger mechanism itself. So here's how it is inside of the gun. Exactly like that. You can see where the two bolts run through it. So what happens is when you pull the trigger down, this will shoot forward and it will release the string. And then when you cock it, you have this forward, you push the string back. I think this will be right here. Push the string back, does that, and then we let the string go forward. Obviously this will be a little bit closer. Put the string forward, this shoots up into there. It goes like that because of the spring tension right here, hooked up to the inside. And it will lock because this won't let it go forward because it's stuck right there. So when you pull the trigger down, it goes forward like that. And this screw right here is very interesting and something I just made last week actually, and I don't think anyone else has ever done it. This is a hair trigger, adjustable hair trigger for a homemade crossbow. What it does is if you put this screw in farther up, you'll have a longer trigger pull because you'll have to pull this all the way down like that. But since this screw is out here and it won't let this go all the way up, it gets stuck right there, and I only have to pull the trigger that much. So you can see it's a lot less of a trigger pull and a lot easier to pull the trigger because it was really tough when the trigger was up here, and now I don't have to pull it as far. So that's something that's very interesting and it works very well. No malfunctions so far. Works flawlessly. It's a really cool This is mainly the reason I wanted to make this video, because I wanted to share this homemade hair trigger system. So you can adjust it simply by loosening the screw, taking it out, or putting it farther in. It's pretty awesome. So with the trigger group installed as I explained, now you understand it. Once again, you pull the string back, or while this is forward, of course. Pull the string back, it goes like that. Then you hear that click, and that's how you know it's locked in. And you pull the hair trigger. Do you remember I've adjusted it to be a very light trigger pull? You pull it, just like that. As you can see, watch how much my finger moves, and then when the claw moves. Hold on. Now for a homemade, I mean that's pretty good for a homemade hair trigger system. You can see right like that. So it's probably 1/4 of an inch of trigger travel. Of course, that's nothing compared to a real hair trigger on a real gun, but it's against this homemade and it's mechanical, different mechanics than a real one, but it is pretty nice, relatively light trigger pull. And one other thing I have forgotten to mention, which is a big thing, on the front here, if you can see the drawstring, which once again, it's just a paracord, 550 cord. What am I trying to say? Oh yeah, I don't have the duct tape on it or any tape or anything on here. Right here across the top I had duct tape on it to stop it from fraying when it traveled down here, and I cocked it, traveled, because it shoots up and down the track a lot when you're using it, as it should when it's a crossbow. But as you can see right here, is the string travels on the top here, and I just yesterday, actually 2 days ago, I took off the duct tape because it really made it feel gunky and not really reliable. It just made it feel really bad. I didn't like it, and I finally took it off yesterday, a year later, I know. But you can see this track, all those scratches, that's from the duct tape, the adhesive with the duct tape, and the outer layer of wearing off on this. So over time, after shooting it without the duct tape on here, with just paracord, that'll shoot off, I'm sure. So what I'm trying to say is when you use paracord, you don't need to protect the cord. Paracord, it'll last a really long time before you need to restring it, and it'll just work perfectly every time. So then shoot it again. See how the compound bow system works. And then once again cocking it, you have to reset the claw piece, as I keep calling it, if I can get it. Of course, it's not going to be easy on camera for you guys. There we go. So you reset the claw like that. Notice how only one part of it's showing. And then we're going to pull the string back. See if I can get this on camera. Pull the string back. Go all the way towards the back with the string. Let it go forward and it locks itself into place. Pull the trigger. It shoots. So that's it. That's the homemade crossbow. A year later, all the things I've done to it to make it a bit better and smoother operating. So as always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or even opinions, you can put them in the comment section. But other than that, thank you for watching.